Some machines look brilliant on paper and then completely fall apart the moment they touch reality. Others are just so strange you have to wonder what the engineers were even thinking. This is a fresh batch of the weirdest, most bizarre machines ever built, and honestly, some of these make the last list look tame. Quick pause here. If you're enjoying this kind of content, subscribe and hit like. It genuinely helps this channel keep making videos like this. Flying tank. The idea was simple on paper. Strap wings onto a tank, tow it behind an aircraft, release it mid-flight, and have it glide straight into combat, ready to fight the second it touched down. In reality, the concept fell apart almost instantly. The tank was so heavy that the towing aircraft could barely get it off the ground in the first place. During the only real test ever conducted, the plane had to cut the tank loose early just to avoid crashing under the extra weight. Once airborne, control was minimal, and landing was rough at best. Even in a perfect scenario, you'd still need a massive dedicated aircraft just to deliver a single lightly armed tank, compared to just loading it onto a train or truck. After that one disastrous test, the entire idea was scrapped, proving that combining two machines doesn't always make one better machine. Sometimes it just makes both of them worse. Nuclear train. On paper, this sounds like the ultimate locomotive. Endless range, no refueling stops, and virtually unlimited power. But the moment engineers looked at the details, the idea collapsed under its own weight, literally. Running a nuclear reactor safely on a train meant adding heavy radiation shielding, which made the whole locomotive absurdly heavy and inefficient. That extra weight alone would tear up tracks faster and force costly reinforcements across entire rail networks. Then there's the obvious problem. Any derailment or collision could turn into a radioactive incident. And unlike a submarine sitting quietly at the bottom of the ocean, trains roll straight through the middle of cities every single day. Maintenance would require specialized nuclear crews just to keep the thing running safely. In the end, ordinary diesel-electric locomotives did the job cheaper, safer, and without any of the catastrophic downside. So the nuclear train never made it past the drawing board. Kugelpanzer. This one is essentially a rolling metal ball with a driver crammed inside it. It looked futuristic, almost like something from a retro sci-fi poster, but it had barely any armor, almost no weapons, and terrible visibility for whoever was driving it. The operator was basically sealed inside a spinning steel shell with very limited control over where it actually went. It struggled on rough terrain, could be disabled easily, and offered absolutely nothing that a standard scout vehicle couldn't already do better. No real speed advantage, no real protection, and no clear purpose. It never advanced past a single strange prototype. Bertha the tunnel boring machine. Bertha was one of the largest tunnel boring machines ever constructed, built specifically to dig a massive highway tunnel underneath Seattle. On paper, it was an engineering marvel, capable of chewing through Earth at a scale nobody had really attempted before. But almost immediately after digging began, everything went wrong. The machine overheated, its cutting head got damaged, and it eventually became completely stuck deep underground. You can't just pull a machine that size back out. Crews had to dig an entirely separate access pit just to reach it and make repairs, adding years of delays and enormous cost overruns to the project. The sheer scale of the machine made every single problem harder and more expensive to fix. It eventually did finish the tunnel, but it became the perfect example of how going bigger doesn't always mean going better. Early bricklaying robots. These sounded like the future of construction, a machine that lays bricks perfectly, tirelessly, without ever needing a break. But construction sites are messy, unpredictable environments, full of uneven surfaces and constantly shifting layouts. These early robots simply couldn't keep up. They were slow, expensive, and needed near-perfect conditions just to function properly. Meanwhile, human crews were still faster, cheaper, and infinitely more adaptable to whatever the site threw at them. So most of these early robotic systems quietly failed to catch on. Overland train. This was a 170-meter-long land train designed to haul heavy cargo across frozen, roadless wastelands, and it actually worked. But it was also incredibly complex, difficult to maintain, and required constant logistical support just to keep moving. Then helicopters entered the picture and made the entire concept obsolete almost overnight. Why maintain a massive mechanical convoy crawling across the ice when you can simply fly straight over every obstacle in your way? Monorail. Mid-century monorails were marketed as the transportation of the future. Sleek trains gliding silently above traffic on a single elevated beam. In practice, they turned out to be far less practical than the postcards made them look. Building the elevated guideways was expensive from the start, and expanding the system later on was even harder. Switching between tracks wasn't simple either, which severely limited routing flexibility compared to traditional rail systems. Breakdowns became a much bigger problem too, since a single stalled train could block the entire line with no way for anything behind it to get around. Evacuating passengers safely from an elevated beam also created serious safety challenges. On top of all that, monorails rarely integrated well with existing city infrastructure, making it difficult to scale them into full transit networks. In the end, subways, buses, and conventional trains proved cheaper and far more flexible, leaving most early monorail systems abandoned or reduced to small niche attractions. Nuclear excavation. At first, this sounds like a nuclear-powered digging machine, but that's not what it actually was. Instead of building a machine at all, engineers proposed something far more extreme, using actual nuclear explosions as the excavation tool itself. The concept was simple in theory: detonate underground and instantly displace millions of tons of earth to carve out canals, harbors, or entirely new landscapes in seconds. And in tests, it did work, in the worst possible way. Every blast created a massive crater, but there was no precision and no way to control the shape of what you were supposedly building. You didn't get construction, you got pure destruction with a rough blueprint attached to it. Worse still, radiation and contamination left the surrounding land unusable afterward. It proved a brutal point rather quickly. Just because you can move a mountain with nuclear power doesn't mean you can actually build anything useful with it. Jet-powered snowblower. This one genuinely looks like something ripped straight out of science fiction, and in a strange way, it kind of was. Instead of using blades or conventional machinery, engineers bolted actual jet engines onto snow-clearing equipment, using raw thrust to blast snow directly off the road. The logic was simple. If you generate enough force, you don't need to shovel anything at all. You just erase the snow using air pressure and heat. And technically, it worked. Snow disappeared instantly, thrown massive distances in seconds, clearing entire stretches of road almost immediately, but the real-world version was far less practical than the concept. The jets burned through fuel at an incredible rate, were expensive to operate, and were genuinely dangerous to run anywhere near people or vehicles. Even worse, instead of clearing the snow cleanly, the heat often melted it into water, which then refroze into solid ice sheets, making the roads even more dangerous than before the jets ever showed up. Loose debris like rocks and ice chunks could also get launched at high speed like projectiles. In the end, it wasn't really a snow removal solution, it was just a very expensive, very loud way of turning one problem into a worse one. From a tank that couldn't fly properly to explosions used as construction tools, every machine on this list shares the same lesson. Sometimes the idea sounds brilliant right up until you actually try to build it. If you liked this one, there's an entire first part of this series waiting for you, so make sure you're subscribed and drop a like before the next one drops.